Hey guys, welcome to episode 3 of Food for Thought. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am so excited to be sitting down with Tori Lopez. We actually met over TikTok when she followed my account when it first started, and she has been a huge supporter of mine, and I really appreciate everything she has done for the Green Room Recovery Project and the podcast as well. But she is a dancer and a theater performer from New York, and we will be talking about her recovery journey and how theater has impacted her and her recovery process. So I'm so excited, and let's welcome Tori. Thank you so much for being open to be interviewed and being here today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I am, in fact, a performer. My name is Tori M. Lopez. I specialize in dance and choreography, but my passion is within theater. I have been doing theater basically since I could remember, and I love this connection. I always say I would never wish an eating disorder upon anyone, but I'm so glad that we found recovery at the same time. And yeah, I'm just so excited to get into everything.
Yeah, thank you so much. I am a musical theater person myself, so I love having fellow theater people on here. It's amazing and so much fun. We'll just get straight into it, I guess. Tell me a little bit more about your eating disorder journey. Try to exclude numbers, and you can include some behaviors if you feel it's necessary. I'm sure you can gauge what would be triggering to say and what not would be. So feel free to tell as much as you're comfortable with. I'll not push you to talk about all of the details, but just enough so we can kind of understand what it's been like for you and answer some of the questions later.
Amazing. And you could also interrupt me at any time, but I am very, I like to say treated. So I always tell my story with the exclusion of numbers related to weights, calories, or meal plans,
Beautiful.
also
Thank
including
you so
vitals.
much. Yes.
And yeah, I think after to disclaim being in treatment and recovery for about almost year and a half, 2 years now, it has definitely given me the guidance on how to talk about an eating disorder. So my struggles with food started honestly when I was quite young, younger than I expected. Every time I think about it, I think of a new behavior that I picked up at an absurdly young age. But when I was around, right before becoming a preteen, so around like 8 years old, I vividly remember a doctor talking to my mother about the weight fluctuation that I had been experiencing at such a young age, because I was already engaging in some worrisome, restrictive behaviors, and it was just normalized because I was seen as a picky eater. Which I feel is where it always starts. And so the doctor basically said to my mom in front of me, oh, she's just a picky eater. She doesn't know her full palate yet. And that I was, in fact, too young to know how to starve myself. And so eating disorders were off the diagnoses table. And just hearing that at such a young age kind of like sparked the disorder and awoken behaviors in me that I did not know I had, let alone knew how to do at such a young age with no quote unquote guidance. And that's when I started to grow up on the internet. I feel like a lot of, especially musical theater kids, grew up in the era of Tumblr and early Instagram, which for a young person can be so difficult because there is nothing stopping you from falling deep into rabbit holes of very dark communities that don't get talked about enough, but honestly also I wish wouldn't see the light of day. And it was definitely a journey in my preteen to early teen years because I desired these behaviors that were slowly detrimental to my health. And I was so young that I was on top of the world. I was dancing every day of the week and going to rehearsal from right after school till dinner time. And it was so easy to kind of just forget to nourish myself, which was ironic.
I
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry,
You go
I
ahead.
just wanted to touch on just what you were talking about your doctor, because I feel like that's such. I mean, I understand, like, maybe they think you're 8 years old and all of that stuff, but I also feel like saying that, eating disorders are off the table or all of that, like, anything's possible. And something that, really resonated with me about realizing that you were so young when you started having these behaviors. And I also can relate to that because I was on the younger side too, and a lot of things that I feel like triggered me were also comments from my doctor, talking about my weight fluctuations, except I wasn't losing weight, I was, growing, I was gaining weight as the usual thing. But I think, yeah, it's interesting that the people that were supposed to, keep us healthy and take care of us, I also feel like at the same time sometimes can also do the opposite. For me, it was, my doctor saying, like, I don't know, just like being, making comments about my weight and all of that stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, thanks. Like, that not the greatest thing to hear when I'm not even 13 years old going through puberty. Like, I'm still a child. But yeah, I think something that you also said was, your doctor blatantly telling your mom in front of you guys, like, oh, having an eating disorder is off the table. And at the end of the day, they have no idea what's going on inside of your brain. They don't know what you're thinking. And to say that, I feel like can, in a way, like trigger you to want to have one. I don't know. Did you feel that in any way because you felt invalidated? Because I'm sure you're probably already having these thoughts, and I don't know if you were realizing that that is what you were doing, but I feel like it could make you want to have these behaviors like you were saying, and looking on Tumblr and all of that, just making you want to have these behaviors and glamorizing it for you in a way. I don't know.
Yes, definitely. I think the glamorization of it, especially on the internet, was so influential in my life. And because I was being flooded with all this mixed media about wanting to have this desirable body at the time, especially in like 2012, I was finding myself increasingly and admittingly wanting an eating disorder. I was about 12 years old, and I vividly remember wishing that I was quote unquote strong enough to have anorexia. And I think it is something that a lot of people are ashamed of admitting, but it's also something that, especially in a performative aspect, you want to be special. You want to be seen, especially in this industry. And sometimes the only way to get that attention is with weight fluctuation, or at least that's what the outcome was for me. I was noticing that the more I engaged in behaviors, the more I was getting attention from my choreographer, and I was getting more attention not only as I was going through high school and just playing the basic politics of theater, but I was engaging in these behaviors that at the same time made it seem that it was my only form of success. And so, yeah, I definitely found social media a very big aspect in my development of my eating disorders and how intense they got, because so many times I would recover, or not even to ever put recovery in air quotes, but I would desire recovery, and then I would easily slip back into these behaviors and habits solely because it was all I was seeing on the internet. And so I was the type of person who really liked control. I was diagnosed with OCD from a very young age, and they kind of just used that diagnosis in place of an eating disorder for many years for me. I think it is also something to be said that it is incredibly difficult to receive treatment for eating disorders, especially as BIPOC women and women of color and Latina women, and having all these different stereotypes and different ideations, different cultures, different people in your life telling you that you don't really need help for something that kind of just makes sense to them, and behaviors that go unnoticed because so many eating disorder behaviors are unfortunately normalized in our society.
That is so true, though. I do feel like so many eating disorder behaviors are, normalized in society. That's something that I talk about a lot on my platform, is just, diet culture is just so ingrained in society, and sometimes, diet culture is in some ways an eating disorder, depending on how you go about it. So, yeah, that's super important. Thank you for mentioning that. And also, we'll touch on this more later. I want to finish just with your eating disorder journey, but what you said about how hard it is to find treatment, especially as a woman of color, a young woman who, just for me at least, I was just a teenager, and we'll talk about more about our experiences, but I really appreciated you bringing that up.
Of course, yes. I know it's something that both of us could very much relate to, in the sense of there's this desire to get better that I think everyone with an eating disorder has, whether the eating disorder is kind of clouding your judgment at the time and not letting you see that, or if it's those moments of clarity where you decide, I really, really want recovery, and to be kind of turned away from that is so devastating at times. And we see it a lot within our community, both communities being women of color and also in the theater industry, because it's so played off as, well, I'm just trying to fit into a costume, or I want to be smaller than my measurements, or even dance contracts at times have body measurement standards. And at this point in my recovery, I decline those audition invitations.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they
Because
still have those.
they
I
do.
mean, I understand. Wow, that's crazy. I understand, like, I don't know, height maybe being a factor or something, because I know that, correct me if I'm wrong, but like the Rockettes, I'm pretty sure they all have to be a certain height or something, so all of their legs, get to the same height. But to have measurements that's so unhealthy. And I
Yeah.
wish that theater companies and dance companies understood that. They probably do, and they probably don't care, but that's horrible. I'm so sorry that you have to be
Yes.
in that industry. I mean, I'm a theater person, so I'm sure I will run into that eventually, but seeing that you have a lot of experience, that's horrible.
It really is blatantly disgusting when you see it from casting, but also just like on a personal level, as someone in recovery, it's so like, it makes you think, because how many people are going to engage in behaviors solely because a director needs them to fit their idea? And I find that I did that a lot in college. I segue. I went to Western Connecticut State University and I studied theater performance, where I spent a majority of my first 2 years there just engaging in as many behaviors that my eating disorder felt comfortable with. It was the first time I lived alone. I was 17. I was already struggling with my mental health. And I was in this rigorous audition-based program where, to really sum it up, in your sophomore year, there was such a thing called sophomore promotion, and you had to re-audition for your spot in the program. And just having that loom over you for 2 years, let alone 4 years after you get to your senior showcase and all the exciting things that come with being a senior theater performer, it was something that I felt the need to be perfect at. And as people in recovery from eating disorders, we know perfectionism is a very big part of eating disorders. So many people just thought I was like trying to be perfect, and was this perfect performer. I got perfect grades. I showed up to rehearsals on time. I did everything I could to progress in my career, and I still wasn't budging. And it was because I started experiencing the memory issues and the health complications, and just the disorder was catching up to me. And it was slowly breaking me, not only my spirit, but my ability to perform. And that's where it got really scary. And being that I had to complete an extra class to get a second chance at my sophomore promotion, I didn't originally pass mine. But they were so nice and so considerate of my situation when I came forward and said, "Oh yeah, I have been struggling," which took so much courage to do. They allowed me to re-audition. And I worked a whole summer with one of my professors, just re-engaging in the arts and truly discovering myself as an artist, which was fantastic. And it helped me grow as an artist immensely. But I still had that pressure that I was putting on myself from my eating disorder. And so it really took me until after college, when I was working my first big girl professional job. I was a Chicago dance mob member in New York City, Times Square. I got to wear the bowler hat and the red tights and everything, and everybody recognized us because I was the girl with the Chicago discount. And similar things were happening again. My body was catching up to me, and I had to do what I had been doing for years, but it was getting harder. I was dancing every day and going to auditions and making it far in Broadway open calls, which is insane when you're fresh out of college and you have no idea what you're doing with no agent or manager. And when I wouldn't get it, it just gave the disorder another thing to beat myself up over. So, as many of us say, I was sick and tired of being sick and tired all the time. And I realized if I wanted to continue this career, if I wanted to pursue Broadway, my dream of being in a show 8 times a week and doing the thing that I had worked my entire life for, I needed to get help. So at the ripe age of 22, I made some very difficult phone calls, took some very difficult trips to doctor's offices, hospitals, different treatment centers, and I wound up at a facility that I lived at for 3 months. And there I was able to not only begin my recovery journey, but begin my journey in finding myself within my art. And they made it a really big thing there that if you were a person like me, where dance is your whole life, performing is your whole life, and you don't really know how to live without it, they gave me opportunities to discover myself in physical malleable art, in individualized dance movement therapies, in all sorts of practices that I had never been exposed to. And I say it all the time, I'm very lucky and fortunate that I got treatment, especially when I needed it, because not everybody gets that opportunity. But it was also the most difficult decision of my life, because I had to quit my teaching job where I was teaching dance to children, and I was choreographing a show, and I was going to all these auditions, and I had to just completely stop for so long. And that was so hard to grasp, that when I finally did, and I finally started letting things be, I truly started to embrace recovery and focus on myself to the fullest extent. And within the past year of discharging from this center and creating so many friendships, creating so many connections, and doing a lot of therapy and working on myself, I find myself just now being able to go back to auditions. And even then, I still have to make sure I'm following my meal plan and giving myself those extra snacks, not only to reward myself, but because I know I need it. I did more that day. And it slowly has developed me into this person that when the hard times hit, I am able to persevere. And I think that is what is so beautiful about recovery and finding recovery and embracing recovery, is that I can accept things. I can handle my big emotions, which I feel most performers have. And I learned that I don't have to make mountains out of molehills. I don't have to resort to destructive behaviors in order to have this sense of control over my career, the world, my family, what be it. And I just am so fortunate that I found recovery when I did, and I got the help that I needed, and that I recognized that now is the time, because there is simply never going to be a sick enough. And I think it takes a lot of bravery and a lot of courage to decide you are sick and tired of being sick and tired. And it takes so much bravery and courage to seek out treatment, or even just seek out support from a friend or a family member or whoever you deem your supports be, because it will save your life.
Yeah, totally. Wow, you have touched on so many things that I can, one, relate to and just want to talk about more. It's insane. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for really going in depth and sharing about your journey and the struggles that you had to go through, the self-realizations that you had to go through as well, through your perfectionism, all of that. I think that it's so important, and honestly, a lot of us do struggle with it. So thank you for just voicing that and being vulnerable. Because, I think that that's super important to do, especially when we're talking about something as serious as eating disorders, and something that is so hard for all of us to kind of break the cycle and realize that, one, we have, and two, we do eventually need to get help for. And, sharing all of these hard things and being able to be a relatable person, I think is so important. So thank you. The perfectionism, I totally understand that. I went through the same exact thing. I had no idea what any of that meant. I didn't even realize that I was trying to be quote unquote perfect, or that I was going through that through my eating disorder. But I think, I don't know if you experienced this too, but I think we as a society have a very strict idea of what eating disorders are. And there are all of these little rules, and it's like, if you step out of that, whether you're, maybe you're not considered to be underweight, but you lost a lot of weight, or you're still struggling with all of these food thoughts and all of these food noise, and you are engaging in unhealthy behaviors and unhealthy thoughts. Do you think that that has also had any impact on you, or how has that had any impact on you? Because speaking from a personal experience, I always felt like part of me didn't really fit underneath any category, so I always felt very invalidated. And I was wondering if you have had any struggles with that as well, and what you think about that, and what advice you would give to someone who is also kind of thinking that, oh, I'm not sick because I don't fit all of the categories to be considered X, Y, or Z, or could be considered to have this disorder.
Yes, I think you really hit the nail on the head. So many people go through this intense questioning where they're like, do I deserve help because I don't fit the exact DSM-5 description of anorexia? That must mean I don't have an eating disorder. And I was like that for a very long time. I think it's built into the perfectionism and the need for validation that comes with the disorder itself. I think that we desire to fit into a category because it is easier to also receive help when you have a proper diagnosis. So I find that it was definitely a struggle for myself, not only getting a diagnosis, but accepting mine. Because when I first got the big paper of everything that was like, you have X, Y, Z, and then ABC as well, I was like, hold up, I think you're wrong, because I don't even understand what, for example, ARFID is. or I don't understand what EDNOS is, and all these other different forms of eating disorders that people don't realize they can still struggle with an eating disorder or disordered eating without falling into one of these boxes. Because the reality of eating disorders are you could die from these repercussions at any stage. And a doctor, not only a doctor, but no one could tell your health just by looking at you. You don't know what goes on in people's heads. You don't know what habits they have. You could see someone who you think is the ideal, perfect picture of health to you, and they could seriously be suffering, or the exact opposite, where you think someone must have a problem, but they don't have a problem at all and they're just living their life. So I think having to unlearn the idea of I need to fit into this box in order to receive help, unlearning that definitely helped in the recovery process and in the acceptance process of figuring out how to get help without feeling like I deserved it.
Yeah, thank you. Something that I didn't even think about was learning that you have an eating disorder is one thing, and coming, being like, okay, this is my diagnosis, whatever. I think accepting the fact that you even have one is such a huge revelation. Yeah, I just thought it was a good point to make, because there is a lot of acceptance when you realize that you have an eating disorder and you are diagnosed. You have to accept the fact that all of these behaviors that you have had for so many years, or just a couple months, however long you've been struggling, are in fact unhealthy behaviors, and you have to relearn how to go about certain things because you've had these behaviors so ingrained in you. And having to accept the fact that you have a problem. A lot of people don't like to accept the fact that, they're struggling with something, or that they have some sort of illness, and having to come to terms with that kind of makes it all the more real. And I know that's something that I struggled with, and even my family kind of had struggle coming to terms with the fact that I was struggling with this. It also, once you accept it and learn, it does make the recovery process in a way easier, but also harder. Recovery is just not easy at all, no matter what you think your mindset is going into recovery, because you're going to face so many challenges when you are going through recovery that you probably didn't even think of. And even though you're mentally ready to stop being sick and tired of being sick and tired, I love that phrase. Even when you are ready to recover, I think even just through the process, sometimes you forget, and you just want to revert back to all these coping mechanisms that your eating disorder had, and that your eating disorder just clung on to and had, and it's doing everything that it can to keep fighting to stay with you and stay in your body. So I just really love that point. So thank you for bringing that up, because it's something that I think is super important, is that, being diagnosed and realizing that you have a problem is one thing, but accepting that you have the problem and then really going into recovery is a super important part of the process as well. So thank you so much for bringing that up. I wanted to go more into your experience of having an eating disorder and how that has affected you in your performance career. You briefly touched it. You said that you had your memory issues and you were just overall running down. I was just wondering if you could go a little bit more into that and talk a little bit more about the moment you realized that you knew you needed to get better. You were not going to live like this anymore. You needed to go seek as much treatment as possible to be able to pursue your life and live your life.
Definitely. I was about 21 years old. I had just really started investing in myself and started working these quote unquote big girl jobs, real world jobs, whatever you want to call them. My professor used to call it big girl job because he says you live in the real world. But I was working Chicago and I was auditioning. I had 2 dance classes that I was teaching, and then I was just performing left and right. And I was experiencing a lot of physical side effects. I was constantly going to the doctor for unknown reasons and like stomach pain and other really nasty parts of eating disorders and GI issues. And one spell was me ending up in the hospital due to dehydration because I really just could not keep down what I was trying to consume because I had damaged my body for so long. So I was at my lowest point and everybody thought I was at my highest. I had stopped drinking. I stopped using like substances to cope with things. I started going to therapy. I was doing the thing. I was investing in myself and I was still hiding my disorder from everyone. And so it really took me putting myself in dangerous situations where I was so brain fogged at work that I couldn't even imagine auditioning because the audition combos were not in my body whatsoever. My body could barely get up a flight of stairs, let alone into an audition room. And I couldn't even finish out work shifts. I had to go home early multiple times due to health complications. And I just remember being in the hospital due to dehydration and admitting to them, like, I know why I'm dehydrated. You don't have to tell me. I know what I've done to myself, and now I need help for it. I am forever fortunate and grateful for the doctors in that hospital because they were the ones who handed me a piece of paper and they said, hey, there's this place called the Renfrew Center. They're the first in eating disorder treatments. You should give them a call. And just getting a phone number, getting access to treatment was something I thought was never going to happen. And I think it was very validating in that moment to hear, like, yeah, you do need help.
I'm so glad that, well, I'm not happy that you had that experience. Obviously, it must have been horrible and so scary. I have been there too. And I know how scared I felt in that moment because I had known that I had done that to myself, and coming to terms with the fact that these behaviors were literally putting me in the hospital was a really scary moment. And when at least I also was one of my turning points when I realized that I really needed to take recovery seriously, because regardless of whether or not I'm a performer constantly using my body every single day or someone who has a desk job, this is going to happen and I will be literally killing myself. So as much as that experience was painful and scary for everyone involved, not just myself, but my family as well, I'm glad that I was able to have that turning point, and I am glad that you're also able to realize that this was a time that you needed help. And I'm glad that you are in a space now where you're able to audition again. That's so exciting. I really wish you the best. I know auditioning is so scary, but it's still exciting to be there and realize, like, wow, I'm doing what I want to do. And not only that, I fought my way to get here through a lot of struggles with myself and with my mental health and all of that, but you fought and you're here now, so I'm so happy for you.
You truly hit the nail on the head with that one. It's so rewarding to just wake up every day and be in recovery. Because of recovery, I am able to achieve my dreams. I am able to go into these big Broadway open calls and remember the combination. I could go into any audition room and they could pick a random song from my book and I'm going to be able to remember it. And like you said, it's so fulfilling knowing that I got myself here. And yes, I had the support of my team, my medical team, and I have the abundance of love from my family and my outside supports. But it's truly so fulfilling knowing that at my darkest moment, I heard a lot, the only person who could save you is you. And I really resented that at the time. But now I look back on it and I appreciate the skepticism. And also, I wish she would have taken that a little more literally past me. It would have saved us a lot of time and a lot of struggle. That being said, though, it's just the privilege of recovery and the rewards of recovery show itself every day.
Something that I do think about is the strength that comes with recovery. I didn't really realize how strong you have to be and how much resilience you have to have and determination until I had to do it myself. And it just goes to say that recovery is not easy. It's going to be probably one of the hardest things ever, but the reward is truly nothing that you can even imagine it being. It's greater than that because you did that. Like, you recovered or are in the process of recovering from a deadly mental illness that some people just don't take seriously. But you had enough determination and realization and self-love to realize that you had the problem and that you needed help, and you were going to not stop to get that help, to make sure that you're pursuing your dreams, you are having a happy and healthy life, and you are continuing to build relationships and continuing to work on yourself. And I think that that's such a beautiful opportunity that us in recovery and people who are looking to go into recovery, we have. We have that opportunity to work on ourselves, discover a lot about ourselves, find new appreciation for ourselves, and realize how strong we are. Thank you for bringing that up, because I think not a lot of us, or not enough of us, give ourselves the credit for all of the hard work that we do in recovery, because it truly is hard work. To anyone out there who is going through recovery, at maybe you're towards the end or just at the very beginning, you are doing amazing, and it's a hard thing. But give yourself grace, give yourself enough appreciation when you are going through this process and realizing how much strength it takes. Something that I wanted to talk about and bring up was how hard it is to get treatment for mental illnesses, especially eating disorders. It's a huge problem that I have seen within the healthcare system. I don't know if it's bias or prejudice. I'm not thinking of the quite right word, but
I know the word. It's unfortunately fat phobia and privilege.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great point to bring up about how, in order to receive a diagnosis, you inherently need that privilege of accepting healthcare. Because you could go to 1,000,005 doctors and beg and plead with them, but if none of them believe you because you have to live with an invisible illness, it's incredibly hard to cope with. And I think that's what, to tie it back to, eating disorders are a mental illness. You cannot see them. You cannot see what someone is struggling with. And I think in our society that is inherently biased towards whatever beauty standard is the norm at the time, it makes treatment fluctuate. And what the standards for having an eating disorder are, because as people in recovery, we know you could recover from an eating disorder in any way, shape, or form as long as you're not engaging in those behaviors anymore and you're investing in that help that you want so badly. But the medical system is just unfair sometimes, because we have so many cases where people truly deserve help, because at least I believe anyone deserves help at any point in their journey, whether you decided to skip lunch yesterday because you were worried about a bathing suit, or if you've been struggling with bulimia for X amount of years. It's just so difficult that there are so many people who are struggling and can't receive treatment even when they want it so bad, just because the medical system is unfair, it's inherently biased, and as people in recovery, I think it is our duty to lean into the resources that we found help in. There are so many resources for people with eating disorders now that are therapist-led, dietitian-led, and that are available for anyone, whether you have insurance or not. And I think it's very important that people in recovery make those resources known, like allied sources for EDs and the National Eating Disorder Awareness site, and just all these other resources that we have to recover from these deadly illnesses in a world that is inherently against us getting treatment.
Just quickly wrapping it up here, thank you, Tori, again for being here. Well, I have one last question for you, and that is, what are words of encouragement, advice, or anything you would like to say to anyone who is struggling and kind of doesn't know what to do right now?
Well, first, I'd like to say, if you are contemplating reaching out to anyone regarding eating disorder behaviors, you are not only one of the bravest people I know, but you are going to unlock so many doors for yourself, and that starts with grace. Giving yourself grace within recovery or struggling with anything is so important. Similarly, what I would like to say to performers in recovery is that it's easy for us to be vulnerable. We do that within our art daily. And I think that what we really need to focus on next to our vulnerability is our authenticity. And really embracing vulnerability when it's there and when it's genuine and when it's true, and validating every emotion you have, whether it's an emotion you really want to stuff down and push away or something that you're willing to embrace. Meeting that with compassion and authenticity is going to serve you so many different purposes. And lastly, always remember that comparison is the thief of joy. Finding individuality within yourself and authenticity in yourself, as well as others, is going to take you miles, not only in your recovery journey, but in any journey you embark on. I truly believe that everyone deserves recovery. And if this is your sign to jump into the deep end with no floaties and embrace recovery, let it be. Discover the art of letting it be and give yourself grace.
I'm at a loss for words. This was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing this and giving all of your advice. It's really helpful, even for me, and I hope and I know that everyone else will find it super helpful. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for granting me this platform. Thank you for creating this platform for actors and performers in recovery. And yeah, I can't thank you enough for this opportunity.
Thank you, Tori, so much for speaking with us, and I hope that you all enjoyed today's episode. I would really appreciate it if you commented, liked the video, save it, and share it with anyone who you think would benefit from my videos. I post every other Friday, so stay tuned for the next one. I would also appreciate if you followed my TikTok and my Instagram. I post educational content and, lifestyle videos and hopefully inspirational content for anyone who is struggling for an eating disorder as well. So stay tuned for the next episode, and I'll see you later. Bye!